Hello, and may our Father in heaven, Abba Yah, Yod He Vav He, bless you. My name is Michael Langford, and today we're going to talk about Matthew 5, verse 20. Is our righteousness surpassing that of the scribes and Pharisees? Stay tuned.
Hello, and may Yod He Vav He, the Almighty Creator of heaven and earth, be with you, together with His Son YHWH HaMashiach ben Yahweh. I bid you shalom and welcome. My name is Brother Michael Langford with Old Testament Discipleship. Our focus in this ministry is to study every command which Messiah gave in the Renewed Covenant or the New Testament, and to teach people how to obey everything which Messiah commanded. Now, why do we go through all the blessed effort of doing this? It's quite simple. Because Messiah said that this is how we are to go about making disciples in Matthew 28:20. So when we do this, we're simply obeying what Messiah told us to do when it comes to making disciples. Almost every choice we make will come down to that decision. Will we choose to do what Yod He Vav He Almighty and what Yahshua the Messiah tells us to do? Or will we disobey Yahweh and go the way that the devil tells us to go? Every decision we make generally boils down to those two options. As it is written, "Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke shall pass from the law until all is accomplished. Whosoever then annuls one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same, shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever keeps and teaches them shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say to you, that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven." If you happen to miss one of our studies in this series, I ask you to please go visit our YouTube channel, TubeWatcher721. That's TubeWatcher721, and you can catch all of our teaching videos on that site. Thank you, and I hope you'll stop by soon. The real conflict between the scribes and the Pharisees and Messiah was one of a question. Who or what sets the standards that should govern believers' lives? Who or what should govern our lives? Should it be the teachings of rabbinical elders, or should it be the teachings of written scripture? Does following and obeying Yahweh mean that you should obey your religious leaders and their religious traditions? Or does following Yahweh mean that you should obey the written scripture? Who or what should govern the lives of believers? And what happens if your religious leaders don't agree with each other? Or what happens if your religious leaders are contradicting scripture? What should you do then? What should govern the lives of believers? Which one will Yahweh Almighty honor? Will Yahweh Almighty honor the teaching traditions of religious elders and leaders? Or will He honor the written commandments that He put in scripture through the prophets? Will Yahweh lay aside the written scripture in order to honor what men have decreed? We're going to start out looking at this question by looking at the rabbinical point of view and what the rabbinical teachings tell us that they believe. And when I speak of rabbinical things, let me clarify that I am speaking primarily of the scribes and Pharisees and the Talmudic religious teachings of rabbinical Judaism, but I'm also including in that the traditions of the Roman Catholic Church, Emperor Constantine, and even some Protestant pastors who also have come to believe that church tradition can trump what Scripture says. Here is the rabbinical point of view in a nutshell, in a summary. I am God's chosen and his appointed surrogate on earth. God chose me and appointed me to my position, and therefore he will honor what I decree and what I decide. Those who are truly faithful to God must obey me, and those who do not obey me are rebellious and disobedient to God and his chosen vessel. Because of my highly anointed and exalted position, God will honor my decrees, my traditions, and my rulings even more than his own written word in the Scriptures. If there is any conflict between rabbinical tradition and the written Scripture, you should obey the rabbinical tradition and disregard the scriptural commandments. God will honor you if you honor your spiritual leaders. Now, here are some specific rabbinical teachings to give you a clue. If the Jew was tempted to do evil, he should go to a city where he is not known and go and do the evil there. Whosoever disobeys the rabbis deserves death and will be punished by being boiled in hot excrement in hell. A rabbi debates God and defeats him. God himself admits that the rabbi won the debate. When a Jew murders a Gentile, there is no death penalty. What a Jew steals from a Gentile, he may keep. If there are 1,000 prophets, all of the stature of Elijah and Elisha, giving a certain interpretation, and 1,001 rabbis giving the opposite interpretation, you should incline to the majority, and the law is according to the 1,001 rabbis, not according to the 1,000 prophets, only from the rabbis who are men of logic and reason. From Rambam's introduction to the Mishnah. My son, be careful concerning rabbinical decrees even more than the Torah. The Torah contains prohibitions, but anyone who violates a rabbinical decree is worthy of death. And even on the view that precepts cannot nullify each other, that only applies to a biblical precept with another biblical precept, or with a rabbinical precept to other rabbinical precepts. But in the case of a conflict, of contradiction between a scriptural and a rabbinical precept, the rabbinical precept shall nullify the scriptural one. From the Babylonian Talmud 115a. So basically, the rabbinical point of view, teaching the whole rabbinical point of view would take thousands and thousands of hours of lecture, which I don't intend to take. But basically this is it. All non-Jews are animals and subhumans. It's righteous to steal from and to deny basic justice to Gentiles. Rabbis can debate against God and win. Rabbinical rulings and traditions have more authority and can override and overrule written scripture. Anyone who disobeys a rabbinical ruling or teaching is condemned. The important thing is to remember that none of these are in scripture. None of that is godly, none of that is Torah, none of that is biblical. Every one of those rulings are invented by men. Here is Messiah's response to these types of things. Unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. We have to treat Yahweh's written laws, commandments, and instructions a whole lot better than this in order to enter the kingdom, according to Messiah. Messiah says, not one jot or tittle shall pass from the law until everything is accomplished. Messiah upheld the authority of the written scriptures. He soundly rejected the rabbinical rulings when it conflicted with written Torah and written prophets. How do we know this? Because he said not one jot or one tittle shall pass from the law until everything is accomplished. What's important to note about that is jots and tittles are not found in oral teaching traditions. Jot and tittles are only found in written scripture or written Hebrew. until 300 AD or thereabout. The oral teaching tradition of the rabbis was not even written down. It was all passed down orally. When Messiah said not one jot or tittle shall pass from the law, he was upholding the authority of written scriptures and debunking the theory that oral teaching tradition had any authority at all. He said, you treat the commands of men as if they were doctrine given by God. If you want to see details about this, see Matthew 15, 1 through 9. The rabbinical system had become so powerful since the time of the Babylonian exile until the time of Christ that they began to believe that their rulings and traditions were actually part of Yahweh's laws and commandments when they are not. Messiah said, you have become experts at setting aside the commandments of God in order to keep your own traditions which you have handed down. To see details about this, see Mark 7, 1 through 9. As we saw in the rabbinical teaching earlier, they began to believe that the rabbinical rulings could nullify the written commandments that Yah gave in Scripture. Messiah firmly rebuked this heresy. We must beware of the fact that the rabbinical system and the rabbinical problems are not only a Jewish problem, they are a Christian problem as well. The obvious and critical question becomes, does our righteousness truly surpass that of the scribes or Pharisees, or are we repeating their sins by treating Yahweh's written commandments in the same way that the Pharisees treated the written commandments of Elohim? Let's take a look at some examples. Here you see popes literally declaring themselves to be God and Christ in the flesh. Here's another example. And still another. Here's a classic example of a so-called Christian method of looking at the rabbinical system. The Pope has the power to change times and to abrogate laws, and to dispense with all things, even the precepts of Christ. The Pope has the authority, and often exercised it, to dispense with the command of Christ. Sound a little rabbinical? I think so. Here's an example from Emperor Constantine, who forced the Sabbath to be changed from the biblical seventh day of the week so that he could worship the pagan sun gods and the Son of God at the same time. Yahweh clearly commanded that we were to remember to set apart the seventh day of the week, not the first, as holy for Sabbath rest. Here are the scriptures. Pope Gregory I ordered the Archbishop of Canterbury, Augustine, to import every manner of pagan custom and practice into the churches as is feasible, so as to entice the heathens into the Roman Catholic Church. Yahweh specifically commanded that we must never import, adapt, or use pagan customs, traditions, and practices in the worship of Yahweh. Here are those scriptures. It was Emperor Theodosius I who made this decree. On the Lord's Day, which is the first day of the week, again against Yahweh's commandments, Christians must observe Christmas and the days of Epiphany, Easter, Pentecost. Believers are to be occupied with the worship of God. Yahweh commands that we should celebrate biblical feasts of Yahweh, not copy pagan customs. Here are the scriptures. Notice what Theodosius says. Emperor Theodosius I decreed that only those who followed the Roman rules are to be considered Christians. Those who insisted on following what Yahweh commanded in the scriptures were declared to be raving, insane, and heretics. According to Emperor Theodosius I, those who insisted on following what Yahweh commanded in scripture and not following the Roman imperial religious systems and rules could face arrest, torture, confiscation of property, and even death. So here's how Christianity went more pagan than biblical. Things such as our Sunday Sabbaths, Christmas, Lent, Easter, Valentine's Day, and things like that all originated from Babylon, the sun god worship of Nimrod, who they believe was the reincarnated sun god. Roman emperors then imported Babylonian sun god worship into Roman imperial religious practices and brought this into Rome and forced Roman citizens to observe them. Later, they brought all of pagan sun god worship into one name under the name Sol Invictus. The Roman Catholic Church then imported these Roman imperial religious titles, rites, customs, practices, and traditions and brought them into the Roman Catholic Church, but these were all Roman imperial pagan customs. The Protestant so-called Christian churches now reject the Bible, but they maintain the religious traditions of the Roman Catholic Church and Roman Catholic Church traditions, which brought their customs from Babylon and from Rome. All of this originated from Babylon and other pagan customs that Yahweh forbids us to copy. None of this is approved by Scripture, but yet this is what most Christians follow today. None of these practices, your Advent, your Christmas, your Lent, your Easter, your Valentine's Day, your Halloween, your Sunday worship services, none of these things are biblically Christian. None of them were practiced by Christians in the first century. Every one of these practices was first used to worship other gods. The fact is that all of these things originated from the worship of other gods is a very bad thing according to the Bible. But what is even worse is the fact that they all have their Babylonian roots. All of these practices have their birthplace in Babylon. Now I'll show you why that's extremely dangerous in a moment. As it is written, I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her. This is referring to Babylon. Come out of her, my people, so that you will not participate in her sins or receive her plagues. If you want more information about this, please see Revelation 17, 1 through 18, verse 4. In the last book of the New Testament, Yahweh Almighty clearly said that the sins of Babylon and the Babylonian system have reached to the heavens, and that he is going to judge it severely with plagues and punishments. Scripture clearly warns us that Yahweh's people are to get out of Babylon, so that they will not participate in her sins, and so that they will not receive her punishments when he unleashes his plagues, which he intends to unleash upon her. I have real love. I love Yahweh. I want to come out of Babylon so that I can be counted among Yahweh's people. I trust and I reverently fear Yahweh. When Yahweh tells me to get out of Babylon before he punishes her, I have enough fear and reverential respect that I respect and honor his warnings. It is a fact that all of these customs, traditions, holidays, and festivals with their decorations and customs, all of them have their roots, their seeds, their birthplace in Babylon. Beloved, I beg you to hear me and understand. This is not merely about the fact that we should be listening and obeying Old Testament rules, which you've been mistaught to believe that they are out of date, which they're not. This is about, will you have the ability to obey Revelation 18:4? Will you be able to come out of Babylon when the time comes? This is about obeying the New Testament as much as the Old. Beloved, I'm going to ask you a question. How can you obey Revelation 18:4? How can you successfully come out of Babylon if every religious festival, custom, and tradition that you hold near and dear to your heart was born in Babylon in the first place? In Luke 17:32, we are commanded to remember Lot's wife. In case you don't remember Lot's wife, please revisit Genesis 19, 1 through 26. Just to give you a quick review, Yahweh intends to judge Sodom and Gomorrah with complete destructions because of its wickedness. Yahweh gives Lot and his family time to flee, but he warns them solemnly, don't look back, as my judgment falls on Sodom and Gomorrah. Don't look back. The family obeys Yahweh, but Lot's wife disobeys Yahweh. She looks back at Sodom and turns into a pillar of salt. The real question is, why did Lot's wife choose to disobey Yahweh and to look back when Yahweh told her not to? The answer is because her heart was too firmly attached to Sodom. When the critical moment came, she could not stop herself from looking back, because in her heart there was something in Sodom she wanted more than what Yahweh was offering her. There was something in Sodom that she wanted more than what Yahweh was doing for her, and she looked back and disobeyed when the critical moment came. The question is this: are you so attached to Babylonian festivals, customs, decorations, practices, and traditions that you won't be able to obey Yahweh when the critical moment comes? Will you be able to flee from Babylon and not look back when the moment comes? If every religious practice you practice originated in Babylon in the first place, if everything you hold near and dear to your heart originated from Babylon in the first place, will you be able to flee Babylon when the moment comes? Yahweh clearly gave us instructions about what he wanted us to honor and what he wanted us to celebrate. Here are the scriptures right here. Yahweh Almighty clearly commanded us not to copy or to imitate pagan customs. Here are those scriptures right here. YHWH HaMashiach ben Yahweh is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Hebrews 13:8. Here's the thing. Messiah clearly did not like it when the scribes and the Pharisees set aside the Almighty Father's commandments in order to keep their own traditions, which they handed down. Messiah did not praise the Pharisees for this. He firmly rebuked them for it, saying that neglecting the commandment of God, you hold to the tradition of men. He was also saying to them, you are experts at setting aside the commandment of God in order to keep your own tradition. For details, look at Matthew 15:1-9 and Mark 7:1-13. Messiah will not like it any better when we choose to lay aside what the Almighty Father commanded in order to keep traditions which were handed down to us by men. If Messiah didn't like it when the Pharisees disobeyed the commandments of God in order to keep their own tradition, why would Messiah like it any better when we disobey the commandments of God to keep our own traditions? For I say unto you, that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:20. If we are repeating and copying the same sins that the scribes and Pharisees were committed, then we cannot be surpassing the Pharisees in righteousness, can we? If he rebuked them for neglecting the commandment of God and holding fast the tradition of men, he won't like it any better when we do the same thing. When we disobey the command of Yahweh, but we keep commandments of popes, we are repeating the sins of the Pharisees, not surpassing them in righteousness. When we denounce the commandments of Yahweh and Messiah, but we'll keep traditions given to us by Roman emperors, Roman Catholic Church councils, Roman imperial senates, but we trash or disobey the commandments of Yahweh, we are repeating the sins of the Pharisees. We are not surpassing them in righteousness. How we treat and handle Yahweh's laws and commandments in written scripture is in fact a salvation issue. I say that it's a salvation issue because Messiah himself said it's a salvation issue. And if Messiah said it's a salvation issue, we can't claim that it isn't. We must be extremely careful how we treat the written commandments of Yahweh in scripture.
Beloved, I know that this teaching has been really strong medicine, but let's face facts. Yahweh made it very clear that we are never allowed to either add to or subtract from what he has spoken or what he has commanded. When the Pharisees added and subtracted from the rules that Yahweh had given, they were sinning. When Christians add to or subtract from the commandments of Yahweh Elohim, we are sinning. We don't need to be doing that. Yahweh said, don't do that. It's enough to learn and do what he has asked us to do and commanded us to do. Until I see you again, may Yah bless you and keep you. Shalom.